All right, I've got 3:02 on Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. This will be the regularly scheduled meeting of the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District for the month of August. At this time, I'll have the clerk call the roll, please.
Barnes,
Here.
Chaplin, Delgado,
Here.
Vasella, Hannon,
Present.
Here.
Nudo, Dial.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. This time I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the agenda for our meeting today.
I move that the agenda be approved as distributed.
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Barnes,
Yes.
Chaplin,
Yes.
Delgado,
Yes.
Vasella,
Yes.
Hannon,
Yes.
Nudo, Dial.
Yes, and I'll try to break myself of doing roll call since we're all present again, sorry. At this time, I will call into session our public hearing for the Rebuild Illinois Capital Program Grant, or Capital Grant Program. The primary purpose of this hearing is to receive input from the public on a project for which financial assistance is being sought from the Illinois Department of Transportation. The grant application consists of the following: expansion of the solar array on the roof of the MTD's maintenance facility at 803 East University Avenue in Urbana. Beginning on August 9th, 2021, the project descriptions were posted on the district's website at www.mtd.org under the Inside MTD Public Information Documents Public Hearings sections for public review. The notice of public hearing appeared in the News Gazette on August 13, 2021. Are there any comments from the public on the Rebuild Illinois Capital Grant Program? This is an opportunity to make a statement to the Board of Trustees as a whole. We do not take questions. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Seeing no comment from the public, no hands raised. If there are no more public comments, I declare this public hearing on the Rebuild Illinois Capital Grant Program as closed. We will now be moving on to agenda item 5, audience participation. Anyone in the audience who would like to address the board on any topic? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 6, approval of our minutes, beginning with the special board meeting open session July 21st, 2021. After your review of those minutes, I'll ask for a motion and second.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the special board meeting minutes open session from July 21st, 2021. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Our next item is the special board meeting closed session minutes, which have been circulated for everyone's review. That was also July 21st, 2021. I'll ask for a motion and a second.
I move the minutes be approved as distributed.
So second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the closed session meeting minutes from the special board meeting July 21st, 2021. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Finally, the board meeting minutes from the open session of July 28th, 2021. A motion and a second.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the open session board meeting minutes from July 28th, 2021. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Our next item is communications. Carl, anything for the board? Board members, any communications you'd like to share with the rest of the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 8, which is the... Bruce, go ahead.
I got something. I thought the publication in the Gazette this morning was very good. It's a way to solve these problems. Comprehensive, clear. Congratulations.
Thank you, Bruce.
the news just before we got here. Good work.
Very good. Thank you. Our next item is item 8, the community survey for brand perceptions and post-pandemic outlook from Autumn.
Good afternoon. I've just circulated copies of the presentation. I'm just waiting to confirm that it is up. We haven't surveyed our community since 2018, so the last time I sat in this chair, I was presenting results that I wasn't involved in, but this time I was heavily involved and it was really exciting to see these results. We thought it was a good time to revisit doing a survey because of the pandemic and our rebrand and so forth. So we just wanted to check the temperature of what's the community thinking, not just our riders, but the overall community. How are they feeling about MTD? Sure. Okay, slide please. So we really wanted to nail down 3 different areas with this survey. The first would be perceptions of MTD for the whole community. The second is intentions for post-pandemic behavior. And the third is opportunities for growth and ridership. When we began the survey process, we initially just wanted to focus more heavily on the pandemic. But as you all can see that ultimately we decided, because it's not as illuminating as we thought it would be, things are changing so rapidly that results that we would have gotten may not have been as relevant as we had hoped. So we expanded that to just look at overall perceptions and hopefully help that guide us to improve service. Slide, please. Our methodology this year was a bit different than in previous years, and I mean in part because the new data company that we used to conduct the survey, but also because our means of reaching people was quite different, with a lot of people being home, working remotely, and we weren't able to engage the same way that we may have been in a pre-COVID world. So because of that, we reached out through electronic format, through Facebook advertising. We also had a curated email list of those who had opted in to receive communications from MTD. I believe it was around 8,000 once we cleaned the list up. So we sent that out to those who had subscribed to MTD messaging and also through Facebook targeted ads. And because the survey was so robust, it was 8 to 10 minutes long, we really wanted to incentivize it to make sure people were going to complete it, because it was a pretty big ask to get people to go through that whole survey. So we...
Autumn?
Yes.
How do you know this electric format process gave you an unbiased community opinion?
Well, the demographic breakdown was pretty substantially balanced, so we were able to see that it was balanced across all groups, so it wasn't just slanted one way or another.
My understanding you to say that you compared the nature of the background, the people who were responding, to the profile of the average person in the community or the spread of people in the community, right? You
Yes.
correlated those two.
So we broke down the demographics to make sure that we were getting an accurate representation, what we felt was a good snapshot of the community.
I'd be concerned.
Okay, well, with that said, we can, I have one more slide, please. So with the methodology, we received over 1,000 responses. Based on a community our size, our consultant had recommended that we would get responses between 400 to 500 for an accurate survey, and we hit it out of the park with over 1,000. So we were pretty confident with the results, and that gave us a confidence interval of 3 plus or minus 3% according to our data analyst. Ultimately, we just wanted to know how riders versus non-riders, riders and non-riders felt about us. So we opened it up to the entire community. At the end of the survey, we also had an opt-in panel because there were so many things we wanted to ask, and this was already a pretty hefty survey. So we wanted to give people a chance to engage with us beyond the survey if we wanted some follow-up questions. And a whopping 684 chose to opt in to be part of any kind of follow-up panels. So we were quite pleased with that. Slide, please. Slide, please. So overall, we were able to achieve a pretty balanced sampling. Gender was spread pretty evenly. And then if you compare the census data to the ethnic makeup of our survey respondents, it's pretty closely mirrors one another. Age was a pretty good breakup, because in previous years we were pretty heavily on student engagement, but we were able to achieve over 50% were over the age of 35. So that was a pretty good breakdown for us.
So none of the high school kids that ride the bus, we have a big contract to take care of kids that are
Well, we only had 1% under the age of 18 take the survey. I think the objectives of asking those kids would be quite different, because a lot of this stuff focuses on topics that I don't think that they would respond on.
Those are potential future devotees of the MTD. I'd want to know more what they had to say.
Absolutely. I think that would be a great follow-up survey, something targeted towards that audience. But this was a bit heavy, I think, for them, that I don't think that those kids would have participated in this, and I'm not sure that their answers would have been very illuminating. Slide, please. More on the demographics. As you can see, it was pretty evenly spread throughout income levels. And we also asked about their employment status. Most of them are employed, and from those, we asked them to self-identify if they felt they were essential workers, and 67% of those said that they are essential. Slide, please. So the takeaways are that 51% are over the age of 35, only 16% were students, and this was based on pandemic levels. So we took this survey obviously in March when most of the students were not on campus. So we did get a stronger response from non-students. Ethnicities are diverse, and respondents were distributed across all income brackets, and a majority are employed and essential. You can go 2 slides, please. We then segmented the survey between riders and non-riders, and to do that, we asked what their ridership was. We wanted to know if they had ridden in the past 2 years, and that's how we decided if they were going to go on the path to answer questions about ridership. If they did not ride in the last 2 years, they then were directed towards just more community perceptions. So from there, only 3% didn't have anyone in their household who ever rode MTD, which is pretty great for brand awareness. From that 67%, we asked about their frequency of ridership, and 80% of them ride weekly, which is great. Slide, please. We asked about the riders' access to a personal vehicle, and 2/3 said that they did have access to a personal vehicle, which means they still chose to ride with us regardless. And we're pretty excited about that. Slide, please. We also asked them about their reasons for riding, and they could choose more than one. So when we look at this, overwhelmingly, it's work and shopping and errands, which is to be expected, but those are the most supportive trips for the economy. Other things like medical and education are quite essential. So we were pretty pleased to see a nice distribution of different reasons for riding. Slide, please. We also asked what we could do differently that might encourage riders to ride more, as if riding once a week, that 80% wasn't enough. How can we get you to ride even more? And almost 1/3 said nothing, you're doing great. 1/4 of them said expand service. And again, this was taken at a time during the pandemic when we had service reductions. So as you can see from this comment, they said bring back late night service, which we've already done. And others were, another top one was added safety measures, which mask enforcement. So the takeaways from these writing stats, many of the comments provided in those open-ended verbatim responses for increasing ridership were heavily focused on pandemic issues, such as masking, crowds, service reductions, and so forth. 80% of our riders use the service weekly, 68% have access to personal vehicle and still choose us, and 97% of households currently or have previously used our service. 2 slides, please. We had a 5-point scale of satisfaction where they would rate each section. And so this is just a quick representation of various things we asked about their satisfaction. It shows strong support across the board. And these were just asked of our riders. So courtesy of our drivers and overall response and vehicle signage, those were some of the top ones. Slide, please. Most of these areas are above 80% in satisfaction, whether it's somewhat satisfied or very satisfied, and nothing fell below the 68% mark for satisfaction. The lowest was the ease of transfers. Slide, please. We asked, given your satisfaction, what's your likelihood to recommend MTD to a friend or family member? And 93% said they were either somewhat or very likely to recommend. So that's pretty exciting. And not very likely was only 1%. And not at all likely it was 0%. And we asked why. The top 3 were convenience, quality service, and it's economical. Slide, please. Yep, that's fine. Stay there. These are just some of the verbatims that we had of why you would recommend MTD. We saw a lot of the same verbiage throughout all of these open-ended questions. Most of them, the keywords were convenience and affordable, and it's consistent, and the drivers are friendly. We had 46 pages of verbatims throughout the whole survey, so there's a lot of really good information there. Slide, please. The takeaways from satisfaction, 87% of riders are satisfied overall. Most scored above 80% satisfaction. Satisfaction did not drop below 68% in any area, and 93% of riders would recommend MTD to others. 2 slides, please. So when we asked about the pandemic, we had very specific ideas in mind. This was right on the cusp of vaccines opening up to the general public. Everyone was very hopeful. The Delta variant was not even in our mindset. So results, they show they reflect the realities of that things have changed and expectations have too. So we're just trying to remember that this was a snapshot in time since then. So in comparison, though, most riders anticipate once restrictions are lifted that they're going to go back to their pre-pandemic levels of ridership. Slide, please. We also asked them how they would feel about fare reintroduction. And this was before we had reduced the annual pass and all of that, and still a good number of folks would still ride MTD, and only 4% said they would stop riding MTD. Slide, please. Okay. Anticipated usage, again, this was before we reduced the cost of the pass, and most of these are pass or prepaid fares. Only 13% would pay trip by trip. Slide, please. So the takeaways are fare reintroduction will not be a barrier to ridership. 96% of respondents will continue riding with the reintroduction of fares. Slide, please. You can go to, yeah. So for non-riders, we asked them how likely they would be to try riding MTD in the upcoming year. And 72% said they would be likely to try MTD. We asked them why. Slide, please. 30% again said convenience. They thought it would be nice to visit downtown or campus without traffic and parking. Things like they experience. We saw a number of responses that said, I like new experiences. I want to try new things. I think it would be great to try this. So that really gave us a nice way forward that we could maybe reach some of those folks. Slide, please. 2 slides, please. In their perceptions, again, they had that 5-point scale where they could strongly disagree, somewhat disagree, neutral, somewhat agree, or strongly agree. And we just asked them what they thought of us. Overwhelmingly, most of them thought we were a community asset, even though they don't ride. They thought we were reasonably priced and clean and comfortable and so forth. Slide, please. Yep. Takeaways. So 85% of the community has a favorable opinion of MTD, even without riding. The highest perception areas are that we're a community asset, we're easily accessible, clean and comfortable, economical, and we have helpful and friendly drivers. A small segment is consistently neutral, varying between 8 to 19%, and unfavorable perceptions were quite uncommon, only 5 to 8%. Slide, please. Yep. Open comments. So we had a number of really great open comments. I really liked this one here that says, for years I was a daily rider, but not so much now because they bike. The MTD bus drivers are the best. I have had so many wonderful interactions, even when not on the bus, just waving. Miss Sunshine. So this person knows our operators by nickname even. I appreciate the culture and courtesy and kindness. I also appreciate the low cost and easy access to in-town transportation. Slide, please. And this one, again, had some really nice stories. One about a parent of an autistic child who needed help when they ended up in a wrong bus on a school trip, and they got some help from the operator. And another one who really needed to get to the cancer center, and one of our supervisors stepped in to make sure that they got there for their appointment on time. So we love to hear those kind of stories. Slide, please. In our conclusions, the perceptions of MTD are favorable, our brand loyalty is high, and convenience and quality service is really the strong points that we have. Slide, please. Again, convenience is king, and we are the preferred choice with 68% of riders who have access to a vehicle. They still want to ride with us. So we're quite pleased with the outlook that we have, even with the pandemic looming, that we can get through this, and we have strong loyalty in the community.
Question. Very nice. I thought very well done. Of the educational writers for education, I take it since it's not the high school you're talking about, but it's UIUC or Parkland probably. Did you distinguish between people who are staff people and people who are faculty?
So we asked if they were students, and so the question, we didn't ask a question that would verify if they were staff of UIUC. We either just had employed or...
I'm having a little trouble understanding you.
So we asked if they were students, if they were part-time employed, full-time employed. So we didn't distinguish between campus staff and campus students. We really zeroed in on the students.
Well, the staff are likely 8 to 5 type, I would say. And the faculty might be going at odd hours I'm just going to teach the class, coming back. Odd during the day, not full, not 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So they might be different groups in order to make different appeals, is all I was driving at.
Any further questions?
I've got a question. You said overall we had what you consider to be an 85% favorable rating from everybody. Is that correct? Is that accurate? I wrote that down. I don't know what part of your presentation that came from. It's in page, well, there's not a page number. It says 85% of the community has a favorable opinion of MTD.
So during the community, that was during the community
Sure.
perceptions. So that would have been non-writers.
Sure. So how does that compare potentially to maybe our last survey or previous surveys? Any ideas on that?
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'd be happy to get you just a brief breakdown of what those were.
I think
But-
it'd be
yeah.
good to see how that's, if it's just holding steady or what the status is on that.
Yeah, one of the reasons I didn't include that here is that the methodology was so different and the questions we asked were so different that it was like apples and oranges. We didn't really feel it was a fair comparison.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Autumn on the survey? All right, thank you very much. We certainly appreciate it.
And thank you.
All right. All right, our next item will be the managing director's report. Carl.
All right, thank you, Chair. This report is on July statistics, and so our ridership in July, we carried 268,815 individual trips, and that was up almost 35,000 rides from July of 2020. That's a 15% recovery from being really deep into the early stages of the pandemic. So that's significant. However, it is still about 38% or 160,000 rides down from what pre-pandemic levels were. So clearly we're not recovered yet from the pandemic, but we are getting there. And while I don't have the specific information in front of me, I can tell you that so far, just in the last week, the ridership in August compared to last year, keep in mind students weren't back and all the faculty and staff were working from home, and we weren't operating much of the campus service. But we've gone from, we were carrying about 10,000 passenger trips a day to about 35,000 passenger trips per day. So that still is not close to the almost 50,000 a day that we were doing pre-pandemic, but it is a dramatic step in that direction. So it's going to take time. It could take years. I don't know. But we are on a road to recovery, and so that's good news. And we are collecting fares, and so that's all part of the recovery as well. The year-to-date ridership, you can see on the screen or in your packet in front of you, that just matches what I just reported on the month of July, because it's the first month of the fiscal year. So. Moving on to the monthly operating revenue, the operating revenue was 5% above July 2020, and the year-to-date operating revenue was also 5%, just like the ridership we're reporting on the fiscal year, so July was the first month. The monthly operating expenses were 9.2% above July 2020, and the year-to-date were also 9.2% above 2020.
Correlate that with the ridership change in some way?
Correlate the
Operating revenue going up. Monthly ridership rose 15%, say. Operating revenue rose 5%, but operating expenses rose 9%.
Well, let me answer it this way, and if this isn't satisfactory, just let me know and I'll take another stab at it. But revenue went up for a couple of reasons. One, last year we were at a reduced service level, and so the university had reduced their payment to us. And so now we are back to the regular amount. But in addition to that, the regular amount for this fiscal year is higher than the regular amount for last fiscal year. And so it is an even more inflated number, I guess. Though in July, we were not collecting fares yet, so that is not a part of this. Had we been collecting fares, then that would partly be reflected in the increased ridership, but we weren't collecting fares yet. The expenses, if you'll remember, when you passed the budget for this fiscal year, we took some proactive steps to try to change the situation, to recruit and to retain operators in particular, but maintenance employees as well, and somewhat here at Illinois Terminal. And so we made some financial choices to make some adjustments to retain for employee retention, and so that is a little bit built into the expenses. But also, just like you're probably experiencing at home, things are costly right now, and so we're experiencing that as a district as well. That expenses are up.
Carl, the changes you're referring to is the offer of going part-time to full-time for some of the drivers, or other things?
We did do that. I don't know that that's reflected in the expenses yet, because for us, the majority of part-timers that go to full-time, really the only change in cost that we see with that is they get vacation. A part-timer doesn't get vacation because they can just say that they're not going to work for a week, and so they don't get vacation. So going full-time, they get vacation, but they didn't all take it in July, so that expense wasn't realized in July. And then they get a larger earn time allotment as a full-time employee than they do as a part-time employee. But again, many operators use that as time off, and so that wasn't an expense that we realized in that month. So health insurance costs, we did absorb 100% of the employee premium, and we increased the training wage rate, we increased the starting wage rate. So those are the kinds of things that did creep into the actual expenses that we realized in July. Let's see, I think, yes, just to close out this portion, the year-to-date operating revenue was $310,000, almost $311,000 below budget, but the operating expenses were also under budget by $478,000. And then I had some notes in the packet there for you. I'll let you read through those. The only other thing that I want to add in, we've talked about mask mandates before on the bus, and the Department of Transportation, in coordination with the CDC, did extend the federal mask mandate for transportation. So that's not just buses and trains, but also airports and the like until January 18th of 2022. So that was set to expire next month in September, and now it's been extended to January of 2022. With that, I will take any additional questions that you have through page 42.
Questions for Carl on the information?
Looks like you're on page 17, looks like this building is breaking even.
Yeah.
That's good, eh?
That is good. We are doing well so far. Things are coming back, and yeah, and expenses we haven't had any outlier expenses like an elevator breaking or anything like that. So yeah, things are good right now.
Margaret.
This is sort of in relation to the article in today's newspaper where you talked about the cuts because we didn't have enough drivers to go around. Could you explain a little bit about how you decide sort of where the cuts should be made? And is the only way to find out whether your route's been, I shouldn't say cut, maybe I should say spread out or reduced or something like that. The only way to find that out is to go to the website?
Yes. Let me give a caveat. We are really struggling with this. We absolutely recognize that this is not an ideal situation for the community or our riders, and we very much regret having to have any service reduction. But it's a reality that we have to deal with, and so we felt like we had two options on how to handle the driver shortages. One was to just make a cut to the level of service for the entire, I'm going to call it a work board, but the driver pick period from mid-August to January. And we could just say, we're going to reduce the level of service by 5% or whatever, and we're going to just advertise it that way. We're going to publish it on the website, in the schedule book, everything. And then everybody knows exactly what there is. That was option one. Option two was what we ended up doing and what we are doing now, and that is on a day-to-day basis, we're evaluating whether or not we have enough drivers. And then if we're short drivers, if we're short the number of drivers that we need to provide the full service, then we reduce the level of service by that amount. The reason we ended up going with option two is many days we don't have to cut service. For instance, today we didn't have to, we hardly had to reduce any service today. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays we're doing fairly well, and we don't have to cut much service. But then Mondays and Fridays are stressed more in that regard, and so we have a deeper cut to the level of service. And so we felt like it was better to get the maximum level of service on the street that we could, even though that introduces some confusion. Because if we just made the straight cut, there could be days that we have plenty of drivers to provide the service, but now we're not providing the service. And so now we have to figure out what to do with those drivers. And people could use that service, but it's not available because we made that cut. And so neither option is great. Neither option is good, but we decided to go with the one that provided the highest degree of service on a daily basis that we are able to provide. So that's the first part of your question. The second part of the question is, how are we communicating this? And the communication is what makes the option that we chose most difficult. We have a service on our website that we strongly encourage all of our riders to sign up for. They can sign up for an account, and if they ride the red every day and then the blue every day, they can favorite those routes, and every day that something impacts those routes, a reduction in service or even a reroute, they will get an alert on their phone or in their email that will identify specifically what aspect of that service, that route, is impacted. That's the best way for people to get accurate, real-time, up-to-the-minute information. Outside of that, we push all of this out on all of our social media accounts, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that, and it's on our website. And so we've tried to get it out as much as we can, but if people don't check those communication channels, they're not going to know, and that's a problem. And we recognize that. We're just trying to do the best that we can in a really crummy situation.
Hey,
Well,
Carl.
how do you decide, say, when you know that you're going to have to spread things out a bit, that it's going to be the red line or the green line or the blue line?
Yes, that was another part of your question. So what we're doing is we're not cutting any routes. We never are saying the red route is not going to run or the ruby's not going to run or any specific route is not going to run. What we are doing is reducing the frequency of service. And so we're trying to make the best of a bad situation, and that will at least mean that people aren't stranded because the route's not operating. But what it does mean is if they always take that 8:07 bus to get to work by 9 o'clock in the morning, and that 8:07 is one of the trips that gets dropped, they need to take the earlier trip to get to work on time. And so they do need to pay attention. They have service, they have a route that they can ride, but that particular trip might not be running. And so we're picking routes that have higher frequencies generally, and we're reducing the frequency of that service rather than eradicating a route. And I think the other part of your question was, how do we know what we're doing? And we schedule 7 days in advance, and so 7 days before, we'll say day X of service, we know, okay, 7 days out, we have 25 runs or driver assignments that we don't have drivers for. And now we spend the rest of those 7 days trying to get those runs filled. And so we might have 25 or so on day 7, and then we have 24 on day 6, and then maybe by day 2, we're down to only 18 open runs because we've gotten operators who are willing to work overtime or something has changed, and so we have additional availability. So we just spend those 7 days trying to get as many of those runs filled as we can with overtime or new operators coming out of training, that kind of thing. And so then the day before that day X, we know, okay, we got it down to 13 open runs, and so we know that we're going to have to make the adjustment to the service level, and we push that out in all these manners that I talked about.
So any route could be affected. It isn't sort of concentrated in certain routes. You said a lot had to do with the routes that had smaller, quicker frequencies of stoppings and so on. So, a route like the one I ride, which probably doesn't have very much, might be safe for river.
I think it would be fair to say, although I wouldn't want to give any guarantees, but I think it would be fair to say that the lower frequency, this is the one time a low frequency route has an advantage over other routes. The lower frequency routes are going to be last on the list of routes to cut. There can be times, just because the way, and this, we're getting really into the weeds here about trying to schedule transit operators with complicated schedules and long hours of service and all of that. But there could be some interlining situations where a driver assignment primarily affects let's say the yellow route. I'm completely making this up, but just for illustrative purposes, it primarily runs the yellow route, which is high frequency. But at some point in the day, that bus does a one-off assignment on the bronze or something like that. And so because it's tied to that one trip on the bronze, that one trip on the bronze could potentially be affected also. That's a really bad example, and I'm sure my operations director right now is pulling his hair out of his head that I'm even using this as an example. But I'm just trying to give a kind of a what if. So I can't give any guarantees, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. But generally speaking, yes, the lower frequency routes are not going to be seeing cuts unless we have a COVID-19 outbreak and we lose a whole bunch of additional operators for a period of time and that kind of thing. And so, I mean, we can only respond to the situation that we have.
Amy?
I just want to make 2 clarifying points that I think will help. Right now, there are only 9 routes that we've identified that we've cut down the frequency. It's just 9 routes. So for riders, if you ride one of those 9, you need to be aware. But for people who ride the gold, not going to impact you whatsoever. If you ride the brown, no impacts, lavender. So there are several. The other point I want to make is that the real-time information does reflect if the trip isn't on the street. And so that's helpful for the passengers in the moment, especially those who just are on campus and hop out. It's reflected when they look up the trip.
So I just want to close the loop on this. So you've got 9 routes that you're basically high potential that there could be adjustments to. Is that right?
Correct.
So does the public know that if you're riding one of those 9 routes, there's a good chance that something potentially could happen any day or time? Is that accurate too, or not? Like your general ridership, if you ride these routes, you should really be checking this.
Yeah, I believe
are you, are you telling the, are
I
you
believe
telling the
we've
public
identified those.
specifically, these 9 routes,
Yes.
there's a chance that
If,
there could
yes,
be an issue here?
yes, it's the top article on our website. I personally answered phones for 90 minutes and was explaining it to every customer, and they said, oh, I know. Just
Good.
tell me when my next one's coming.
Awesome. Okay, cool. That's great. Additional questions for staff, Carl, on this item or others inside Carl's report? Seeing none, we will move on to our next item, which is our first action item, and that is resolution number 2021-3.
Excuse me, Brad, I had a question about Morgan Stanley, but I didn't know we were going to skip over it.
Okay, go ahead.
Why all the interest in these Salt Lake City banks?
Well, there is no interest on our part in Salt Lake City banks. We do still have some CDs with Morgan Stanley. We are in the process of moving those out of Morgan Stanley. But we do still have some that the term has not expired, so we haven't moved them. And they make the investment decisions of the CDs. We don't do that.
That was it.
All right. I see our grants manager, Ms. Sullivan, has moved to the table for our next item, Resolution 2021-3, Rebuild Illinois Capital Assistance Program. Jane.
Thank you. So this action item is related to the public hearing we had at the beginning of this meeting. Both of those are requirements of applying for the state grant funding. This state grant is familiar to us. We received funding for the first round of Rebuild Illinois Capital Assistance Program, and that's what we're using to fund a couple projects, some bus replacements, a rehab of our kiosks, and the solar array that we're building on the land across the street from our facility in Urbana that we're leasing from the sanitary district. So this year, there's another round open now. We plan to submit an application next week, and what we are working on for this round is an expansion to the solar array that is on the roof of our maintenance facility. So in 2014, we installed solar panels on the roof of our maintenance facility in Urbana. And since then, we've expanded that facility so we have more roof space. That project finished up in 2017, so we have more room for solar panels on that roof. We were able to do some preliminary engineering work in order to get some good numbers for our grant application. So we're looking, your projects can be funded through this grant at 100%. There's no local match required. So we're going to apply for the whole amount, which our estimate right now, we're still kind of having the engineer do some final tweaks, but our estimate right now is $2.1 million for this solar array expansion. The engineer is estimating about 330,000 kilowatt hours of renewable energy generated annually through this through the expansion. So we've still got we're averaging about 200,000 kilowatt hours with the original array on that same roof. So 530 total. And what else do I want to say? Based on our historical, so the array is and will continue to be with the expansion, the renewable energy that's generated is fed directly into our facility. Sometimes there are moments in time where we're producing a little more energy than we can use, and then that's sent back to Ameren, and we get a credit for that. But that will be the same case with this array expansion. And based on our historical electricity usage in that facility, were the two arrays together, the original and the expansion. I'm not counting the solar array across the street. We think that will offset about a little less than half of the electricity that the maintenance facility uses. And remember, the solar array across the street feeds the hydrogen production station, but the plan is to feed the facility. My request here is for the board to adopt a resolution authorizing the filing of this grant application with IDOT. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board on this item? Dick?
Yeah, have you done some numbers in terms of, for lack of a better way of putting it, these solar arrays, how long does it take before it kind of pays for itself with savings?
Yeah, I haven't done that for this expansion.
Is there any historical information on that?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, Dick, and I think I can get this to you if I can find the file. But when we did that first array that Jane was mentioning in 2013 or 2014, whatever that was, we did then, and the study that we looked at, or the analysis that we did, if I am remembering correctly, and I'm probably not exactly right, but I don't think I'm greatly in error. I think it was 12 to 13 years that the payoff would be, and that's just a that's just a financial consideration. That's not taking into consideration that we're reducing our carbon footprint, that we're not burning fossil fuel, you know, and all of that. And so when you take that into consideration, it's even shorter, but it's a little harder to get your hands around what a number is for that.
What's the anticipated life of these panels? Any idea?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I think it's like 30 years.
That's what I was gonna guess.
Yeah, I think it's 30 years.
Thank you.
Bruce?
Yeah, are we going to be able to sell hydrogen in the summertime? We have a low use for it, and the sun's shining, so we could make hydrogen in the summer and sell it to somebody that might want hydrogen.
I think that question combines part of elements from the solar and then elements of the hydrogen. So let me take a stab at this. The hydrogen production, so setting aside the solar energy right now, but the hydrogen production that we will be producing hopefully next month when the station is energized, will produce more hydrogen than we can use because we only have the 2 vehicles right now. And so we're getting ready to place another order, and we have plans for additional ones after that. And at some point we'll have the number of vehicles that will use all of the hydrogen that we produce. But you're correct. We early on in this, we are producing more hydrogen than the 2 vehicles that will be operating can use. We thought for a time we had a third party that would be interested in purchasing that excess hydrogen, which would have been fantastic to be able to do that. However, I'm not. I don't know that we're clear at all what happened, but they just stopped communicating with us and responding to emails and phone calls. And so I don't know if that's dead, or if that's just comatose right now and maybe could come back to life at some point and be a thing. But even if it did, that was only going to be for a period of time because at some point in time, in the not too distant future, but at some point in time, we'll be using all of the hydrogen that we use. Even in the summer. It's not a question of season. It's a question of the number of vehicles that we have using the hydrogen.
That's right. In the summer we'll be using fewer.
Can you use your? I didn't hear that.
In the summer we'll be using fewer vehicles. Hydrogen vehicles. I mean, the demand drops enormously. In the summer times when producing from the solar array is maximum.
I would imagine if they have free fuel, they'll run the hydrogen vehicles and take some of the diesel vehicles off the road, but Carl might.
We will continue to use the hydrogen buses during the summer. So the question of excess hydrogen doesn't have anything to do with
see.
season.
Thank you.
It only has to do with the number of vehicles that we have. In your original question, you also maybe were asking about solar production, so the electricity that we produce using our solar array. There are times that we will produce more electricity than we will be using. And the example that Jane gave on the rooftop solar array, so during the day, in the middle of the day, we're producing all kinds of electricity, right? I mean, that's the prime time for energy production with a solar array. But we're only using so much. We're producing more than we can use in that particular moment. And so the excess electricity that we produce with solar immediately goes into the grid, and Ameren gets that, and they use it. But we get a credit for that, so that then in the middle of the night, when our maintenance department is still functioning, we have, second shift, third shift, they're working on buses, the lights are on, heat's on, or cooling is on, whatever. We're still using electricity, but we're not producing any. So then we're dipping into the credits that we get for that excess electricity that we produce and send it back to the grid. So does that answer all the elements of the question? Okay. Jane, do you want to add anything to that? Okay.
Yeah,
Al, go ahead.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but frequently we have questions that are not answered because you have no idea what we're going to ask. But the comment is always, we'll get back to you or we'll find out. Two of them came up with the length of time, the life of a solar panel and what's the payback. And if we could have if Beth could asterisk that and just have a section in our meeting to answer those questions the next meeting, it would satisfy me. I know I had a question on the finance, and that's a year down the road question I asked you. And so I have no idea if we're going to get the question answered, nor will I remember. But it would seem to me to be more informed if we don't have an answer, which I can't blame you for, and trying to figure out what all the questions we're going to ask, if we could have a back check on it.
Some old business, basically, an old
Yeah,
business.
that's a great
section.
idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We would be happy to do that, wouldn't we, Beth? Yeah.
That's a great idea, Al. Thank you. Any other questions on this item for Jane or Carl, specific to this item? I've got one thing that I want to ask about. So 2014 was our last addition to the rooftop. I'm assuming that in the last 7 years, there's been some advances in technology and probably reductions in costs. So are we getting a little more bang for our buck with the system in more than one way, probably with this new system, I'm assuming?
We are estimated to produce more energy with fewer panels. I think there are like a little over 200 fewer panels on this expansion, and you can see the difference in energy production, 330,000 versus 200,000. It's not cheaper than it was in 2014. But we're in a weird economic climate right now, of course. So some of that is, of course, due to that. The estimate takes into account
Sure.
some of the inflated prices we're seeing now.
And we don't have any other storage. We're not storing any electricity. It's either being used immediately or going right back in the grid, right? Okay, all right. Anything else on this item? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve our resolution 2021-3 to apply for Rebuild Illinois Capital Assistance Program grant funding.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 2021-3. Roll call, please.
Barnes,
Yes.
Chaplin. Delgado,
Yes.
Vasella,
Yes.
Hannan,
Yes.
Nudo,
Yes.
Dial.
Yes, that motion carries. Our next item will also be handled by our Grants and Governmental Affairs Director, and that is a contract for a compensation study.
Thank you. We went through a competitive proposal process to hire a third-party consultant to conduct a compensation study for all district employees, all positions. And we received 2 proposals, and you can see that they were rated by the evaluation committee pretty closely. Gallagher received a total score of 81 and Siegel a total score of 80, but they were pretty significant in their price difference. So we felt comfortable going with the lower cost option, which is Gallagher. Checked references and their past work and are and got good reviews, and they're clearly qualified to do the work. So this consultant will do an overall evaluation of MTD's compensation system. They'll look at job descriptions, they'll look at pay rates, salaries, and they'll help us, they'll most importantly compare it with other transit agencies, but also other local companies that are in kind of our competition zone. Similar jobs, similar positions that we might be competing with for employees. And they'll provide a recommendation for a salary structure and changes to our system and kind of a plan and timeline to implement those changes. So the recommendation from the evaluation committee is to award a contract to Arthur J. Gallagher & Co. in the amount of $47,000. They can complete this study pretty quickly within 6 months or so. And I think I'll stop there. And happy to take questions.
And they're prepared to start this right away also?
They are.
Okay.
September 1st.
Questions from the board on this item?
How often do we do this?
This will be our first time.
But do you have a rotation in checking it periodically, or is this?
I have, on an informal basis, done my own version of this. There are some readily available resources that within the transit industry I can access, and so I can get really general numbers from transit agencies across the country. Our national association does a really good job of doing that. And so I've done my own version of it, but it's not a deep dive. It's not a direct comparison to agencies that are similarly sized or that are in similar types of communities and that kind of thing. And that's what this organization is going to do. What Gallagher will be doing is a more fine-tuned, deep dive type of analysis that I just don't have the resources to do.
Do you feel like we have a retention problem?
I know that we have a hiring problem there. In the last several years, we've had a handful or two of job offers that we've made to really good candidates that we have not been able to close the deal with because of the way our salaries are structured.
So if we divided administrative versus the people working in the terminals and driving, et cetera, is it the hiring in the administrative side or both?
100%. Well, it's both. It's not the operators, our drivers, and it's not our maintenance. I am really confident in saying that nobody holds a candle to us. Nationwide, nobody holds a candle to us when it comes to drivers and maintenance. In terms of our hourly workforce, and I think the timing has been interesting, Ellen, with you coming on the board. I think you came in right after we had a lot of discussions with the board about making some adjustments we have already made to Illinois Terminal employees to try to correct some imbalances in our wages with that employee group. So we've already begun that process because we don't need to do a study to see that there was an imbalance with the workforce here. And so the board over a year ago, we did it mid-fiscal year, made some adjustments to wages here at Illinois Terminal. So hourly, that's a group. But primarily what we were talking about in terms of the study is the administrative side. And when I say that we've made offers that we just haven't been able to close the deal on, when I say that, I'm referring to administrative positions.
Just one more follow-up. So the $47,000 fee is for strictly administrative evaluation?
No, it's everything. We felt like if we're doing this, we ought to just do it and get the best information that we can, because it's helpful to know that we're doing really well in this area too, right? I mean, I can sit here and I can tell you I'm confident that we pay really well, but
I go back to the retention issue. Then if you have a fairly good retention in the operator situation, I don't see an operator going to Decatur. You're going to run comps against other MTDs, and I don't see the value of doing an evaluation on operators. I think a local is definitely, in line, but I'm trying to tailor it a little bit so that you can cut costs a little bit. If the emphasis is on administrative, I think it's a good idea because they will go to Decatur or Chicago or wherever. But the operator side, or the hourly side, I just don't see the advantage. I'd want to know locally where they could bounce around to, but they're not going to pick up and move.
I hear you, and I can appreciate what you're saying. I will say that we are doing the local comparison, so we will have that. The cost difference, I think that there probably is maybe only a negligible cost difference between looking at that with other transit agencies. We're already making the request.
I don't know that, but I'll trust your thought on it. But I did this with Champaign County Board many times, and when we went to secretarial, I just did not see the value of going out and doing a comp with Bloomington or Piatt County or all the other ones. It just they're not, people are not going to pick up and move for a secretarial. They'll go to U of I or they'll go somewhere else. But I guess if your scope was set up so that you used it to tailor different types of jobs, I think you would save money. That's just my point.
If the board is interested in making a change to the scope, we can talk to the contractor about that. I will say that from a staff perspective, we do think there is value in when we are talking to that employee group and we're talking about cost of living increases and that kind of thing. And I tell them this to their face, so I'm not trying to say anything secret. I think it's valuable for us all to have the best information on the table at the same time. And so when we are trying to have an understanding on what our cost of living increase is going to be, and they may say, well, we think it should be X, and staff is saying we think it should be Y. I think when we can say, look, when you take cost of living adjustments into consideration, you're the highest paid operators in the country. I think that's valuable for us to be able to say that. And I think it's good for our employees to know that. I think it's valuable for them to have that information and to feel good about how they're compensated and how the district values them. So I do think there's value in having that information. But look, if you guys want to give us direction to change that scope, we can have that conversation.
Additional questions on this item? There was something I was going to ask about, and I've lost my train of thought. But that was a good question, Al. I don't know. I'll think of it later. At this time, I'll ask for, if there's no further discussion, a motion and a second to approve this compensation study recommendation of award to Arthur Gallagher Company in the amount of $47,000.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the compensation study award. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
No?
No.
Motion carries. Our next item is the INT General Transit Feed Specification Real-Time Interface Contract. Please proceed.
Thank you. So this is a contract we would
What's
like to
your
enter
name?
with. I'm sorry?
Give us your name.
This is Ryan.
I'm sorry. I'm Ryan Blackman. I'm the software development manager at MTD. So as you may know, Init is the CAT AVL provider that we use to communicate with buses. They provide everything from dispatching to real-time information to statistics, all kinds of other functionality. They're really the kind of core of our technology when it comes to operating the buses. They provide, as I said, our real-time information that you can get on our website, on our on-the-street kiosks, through our texting service, various other means. One really notable absence from that list is via Google, these larger national transit applications, Apple Maps, Bing Maps, but in particular Google Maps. So you may have, if you've ridden the bus, planned a trip using Google Maps, for instance. That trip planning information is available because of what is called a GTFS feed. That stands for a General Transit Feed Specification. That's something we've had for probably a decade now. What that provides is essentially a computer-readable version of our schedule book. It provides the routing information, the schedule, the route colors, all the things that make a route and a schedule in a way that a computer can read and then plan a trip against. The Dash RT, which is what we're asking for approval for today, is a real-time component to that General Transit Feed Specification. So what that allows is if you've ever ridden transit in a larger city and gone to plan a trip on Google, when you go to plan that trip, instead of saying this is the schedule for, when the blue bus is going to come to your stop, it can actually say this is the schedule for when the blue bus is going to come to your stop, accounting for the actual real-time location of the blue bus. So if the bus is running late, it's going to adjust that schedule. If the bus is running early, it's going to adjust that schedule and actually be able, if you have a transfer, to adjust your whole trip based on that information. So this is something that we've had, as far as on a stop-centric level, we've had on our website for a long time. You can go to a stop, see the real-time location of a bus. What we've found talking to people at events with customer feedback is that Google Maps in particular, but these larger national apps are a really big way that our passengers get their transit information, and we want to be on those applications and have our information in their hands where they're getting it. So that this change allows us to get that information in their hands, even if they don't come to our website to get it.
Bruce.
Ryan, as I understand it, IT has already done work on this program, and this is then a complement to it or addition to it?
So Init provides us with a lot of software, a lot of hardware for our day-to-day operations.
They already have.
Yes, our relationship with Init goes back 15 or 16 years to 2001, so 20 years. So we've made a big investment in Init. It is I don't think it's an understatement to say we could not operate without their software and hardware. It's really important to what we do. They provide all kinds of things across the full spectrum of transit. So they provide planning software, they provide dispatching software, and kind of everything in between. This is a module that they have had for a long time, but because our relationship with it is so long-standing, the GTFS real-time specification did not exist when we first got in it. So this was not something that was a part of our original implementation with them. It's something that's come along later, and which is why we're having to add it on now.
Questions for Ryan or Carl on this? Margaret?
Yeah, does this mean, well, it sounds like this is going to be sort of hooking us up to a much larger information kind of space. Does this mean if I'm sitting in Cleveland and I can find the real time for the 9B Brown in Champaign?
Yeah, I'm not. It would be available anywhere that you can get. I'm saying Google Maps because I think that's the most common place that this is used. But it's a general specification. So while we plan to get up and running on Google Maps, I know we've had conversations with Microsoft about Bing Maps and getting on Bing Maps. I believe Apple Maps has an implementation of this. There are some national transit applications that can consume these feeds. So yes, it would be, the Google Maps that you have installed on your phone would have this information on it, just kind of out of the box.
Ryan, the purpose of this software is to make our service more user-friendly, is that right?
Yes, it's to make our service more user-friendly, to give riders confidence in the service, to give
Give them
riders
information that they
confidence
can
in the
readily have at their hands rather than having to go to a kiosk and see that the bus isn't going to be there for 10 minutes.
It also just makes our data, our information more accessible to,
Yes.
And we have such a transient community with students coming in and new faculty coming in. Google is, de facto the source for most people, and our real-time information isn't on that. So this will allow us to
Yes.
do that. So it makes it much more accessible.
Perfect. Additional questions, Phil?
Ryan, my understanding would be right now, if I were standing at the corner in front of CAMS and I needed to ride to the Illini Union, if I were to hop on Google Maps and it happens to be a day when we're 17 operators short, and that bus that it's saying on Google Maps is going to be here in 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, if that bus is one of our lines that got cut, because we don't have this pushing out to Google, it's not going to be reflected. My bus just isn't going to come, and I'm going to be sitting there kind of scratching my head, right?
That's correct.
So this would solve that problem.
I believe so, yes. So this is really getting into the weeds of the technical ways that this works, but there are actually 3 feeds that are a part of the GTFS real-time specification. We are only implementing 1 feed. It's the most common feed that provides real-time information. There are 2 other feeds, one of which is a specification that's out there, but it's not really being used by anybody. So we're not touching that at the moment. The other is called service alerts, and what that is it's not real-time estimates, but it's things like reroutes and service alerts. There's a nuance with the way it works and the way our data radio works. Essentially, we don't have the infrastructure on our fleet to be able to support that yet. It's something we are working towards because I think it would be really valuable, but we're a few years away from it. So the answer to your question is it will certainly not show them real-time information about those buses that get cut. It is unclear to me if it will still show them on there as unscheduled. But at the very least, when you open Google Maps, you plan your trip, you get a little green live icon saying, this bus is running on time, and you won't have that, and you won't have it saying your bus is going to be here. And
So if you've got 3 different options, one of them's the bus, one of them's Uber, one of them's walking, you've got a rough idea, hey, I should walk or take an Uber, but bus ain't coming in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Or wait for the next bus. Or wait for the next bus.
Additional questions on this item? Tomas?
Hi, Ryan. Has there been any sort of demand or interest from the public who has an awareness of this technology?
So this is not, this is a very jargony transit thing. I think that your average person on the street doesn't know what GTFS RT is, but I can tell you anecdotally, when I worked an event on Saturday for students on campus where we were trying to get information in their hands. And I can't tell you how many conversations I have where I say, we have these great tools on our website, you should go there. And they say, oh, it's okay, I just use Google. We just had a comment on a thread about us on Reddit last week where someone said, hey, MTD, I really wish you would get GTFS RT. I'm not sure who this person is that even knew what GTFS RT is, but maybe it was Tomas. But yes, I think it's something that people may not know what they're asking for. But I think there's very clearly a demand to use Google and to have Google and these other mapping providers have good information on them.
Or perhaps just riders who may have spent a bit more time in larger metropolises that have had this technology. Okay, thank you.
Additional questions on this item before we vote? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve a contract. Oh, I jumped ahead, sorry.
I would like to motion that we approve the contract for the proposal for the GTFS real-time interface with Init.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve our first contract with Init for the GTFS-RT software. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is another contract with Init for the Copilot PC3 migration service. Ryan.
Hello again. So as I explained during the last action item, Init touches a lot of what we do, and the onboard component of the Init system is called the Copilot. It's a PC. It's not a PC. It's a computer that lives in the bus, in every single one of our buses, and I describe it as kind of the brain of the bus. The passenger counters talk to it. It's what facilitates radio and data communication back to our dispatching center. It's what drivers will use to set the head sign. It really kind of acts as the centralized hub for the technology on our bus. We can't put a bus on the street without a working Copilot in it. Currently our fleet is about 50-50, a 50-50 mixture of Copilot PC Generation 1s and Copilot PC Generation 2s. Init has recently told us that the Copilot PC2 is going end of life and is no longer being manufactured, and they are moving to a Copilot PC3. So we have a stock of spares in our inventory. This is not an emergency, but it is something that we need to prepare for. When that stock is depleted and we can no longer get new hardware or get the hardware repaired, that we can put Copilot PC3s in our vehicles. What this contract with Init is doing is making the necessary software changes to our system to be compatible with the Copilot PC3s. So in the future, when we get new buses or when we have Copilot PC 1 or 2s fail, we are able to replace them with readily available hardware.
Questions for Ryan on this item? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve a contract with Init for the Copilot PC3 migration service upgrade. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. All right, that was our last action item for our meeting today. Our next regular meeting of the Board of Trustees will be Wednesday, September 29th, 2021 at 3 o'clock right here in the Illinois Terminal. Anything else from the board or for the board? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
Seconded.
We are adjourned. Thank you.